All right, today we're going to talk about low carb versus low fat diets and which is best for burning fat and getting leaner and which is best for having the most amount of muscle possible. So one of these is going to provide better results than the other, while both of these absolutely can work for you having great physique or great performance. One is going to be more preferred than the other. So first off, to get out of the way, at the end of the day, weight loss is going to come down to calories in, calories out. Meaning you can do this with a high fat, low carb diet. You can do this with a high carb, low fat diet. You can do this with, keto or carnivore, and you can do this with, very, very, very high carb diet. This is all going to come down to calories in, calories out as far as weight loss goes, but there are going to be different body composition results, meaning the amount of actual muscle tissue versus fat you hold, and then also performance differences between these diets. So out of coaching literally hundreds and hundreds of clients over the last 8 years now, and then me, myself, having come from being an ultra runner and then a pro bodybuilder, I've experimented with pretty much every diet out there. I've had clients that come to me, that are carnivore diets. I have current clients that are on carnivore diets, that are on keto diets. I have vegan clients. I myself have gone through periods of time where I've tested keto, I've tested vegan, I've tested extremely high carb diets, I've tested extremely high fat, low carb diets. And I can tell you, across the board, most people have much more success on both a body composition level and on a performance level. So whether they are into bodybuilding and burning fat, building muscle, or whether they're into, say, endurance running and having the best performance there, most people do much better on high carb, low fat diets than the alternative. So while carnivore and keto, while it absolutely can work, and you're going to shed a lot of water weight right off the bat, and you can definitely shed fat, you're not going to have the best long-term results than if you did high carb, low fat. So the reason why this is the body prefers to use carbs as a energy source. So, let's just take kind of protein out of it for a second. You can keep your protein static, in what we're talking about today, whether that's, high fat or high carb. The reality is once you have enough dietary fat for hormone function, for cognitive function, any extra fat after that, your body's going to very easily store that as actual body fat. Whereas carbs, even if you have extra carbs in place, the body's still going to want to prefer to use that as energy. Now, if you're, eating more food than what you need, you're in a calorie surplus, the extra carbs are still going to turn to body fat, or they're going to have a greater propensity to. But the point is the body prefers to use carbs as energy, whereas any extra fat past what you need for hormone, cognitive function, metabolic function, after that, the body's going to very easily store that as body fat. So here's already a strike against, high fat diets versus high carb diets. On the other side of this, and why this is so important is, because carbs can be easily used for energy and the body wants to prefer to use it for energy compared to fat, your performance is going to increase. So whether you're running, or specifically if we're talking about body composition today and burning fat, building muscle, you're now going to have a little bit greater performance. And studies are showing this across the board now, that you will have better performance, say with your lifts, that will help you, one, build more muscle and burn fat. If you're having greater performance within your workouts, you're going to have greater results across the board. Another point that most people don't talk about is, when you are, say, bodybuilding and you're trying to really manage your body composition, so you could go from being in a phase where you're in a calorie surplus on purpose to try to put on muscle tissue. You're in a maintenance phase where you are just focusing on muscle maturity or holding at that weight, or you're in a calorie deficit and you're trying to burn fat and get leaner. The beautiful thing about having a carb-based diet is now what you can do is you can essentially set your protein, keep that static throughout the year. So when I was bodybuilding as pro bodybuilder, I throughout the year, whether I was in a calorie surplus or calorie deficit, kept my daily protein at 300 grams per day. Then what you can do is you can pretty much do that same thing with fats to an extent, meaning you could keep your fats around, say, 60 grams per day. And now what you do is throughout the year, depending on the phases, is you tinker with the carbs up and down. So you're in a calorie deficit, you bring the carbs down. If you're in a calorie surplus, you bring the carbs up. It makes going from calorie surplus to maintenance to calorie deficit much more simple. You can keep your diet a lot more simple by keeping protein and fats essentially the same throughout the entire year and just tinkering with the level of carbs based on what you need to do for your body composition. Another beautiful thing is if you want to utilize carb cycling. You could have days to where on your training days or on a more training demanding day, you have higher carbs because your body is going to utilize that, whereas on a rest day, you could then go ahead and bring your food down. It's going to make, it's going to allow you to stay a lot leaner while still, allowing for great training performance. The whole point here is while both diets can work, having, say, low carb and higher fats in place, or having higher carb and low fats in place, the reason why doing low fat and higher carb is more preferred is because your body wants to use that for performance, for energy, and now you can go ahead and tinker with it based off of what phase you're in or the training demands on that exact day. If you go ahead and you just have high fat, you're not able to really utilize this strategy. You're not able to use the strategy of carb cycling. And the reality is once you have more fat than what you need, you have more dietary fat than what you need for hormone function, metabolic function, cognitive function, the body wants to use that as body fat, especially if you're in a calorie surplus. So while doing keto or carnivore can kind of make your life simple in the fact that you're just pretty much removing a whole macronutrient, you're leaving a lot of gains on the table, a lot of performance on the table. And to be frank with you, I've seen this across the board with my clients. I've seen this within myself, is that while doing low carb can get you lean, so higher fat, at some point, it seems like most people across the board, if they are on lower fat diets and they're utilizing more carbs, they're able to get to a little bit crispier of a zone. This is why most bodybuilders across the board utilize carb-based diets and keep their fats on a relatively low end. So what you should do is you should go ahead, set your protein in a pretty static spot that you can keep year round. Then set your fats in a place to where you're getting enough healthy fats, you're getting enough saturated fats, you're getting enough omegas, you've got your healthy fats in place for optimal function and for where you feel great. For me, that's right around the 50 to 60 grams per day zone. Sometimes I bump it up a little bit more, but I frankly don't like more than 60, 65 grams per day. Keep it where you like it, and then you can then just go ahead and tinker with carbs. You can take carbs to a really, really low point if you're in a really, really strict deficit, or you could jack your carbs way up high, as you're building muscle or as you're increasing your run distance or whatever it is. And this is the thing where you could start with, say, 200 grams of carbs per day, and at the beginning of a growth phase. By the end of that growth phase, every few weeks you could be tinkering that up as weight allows, as training performance allows. And this is a beautiful thing with using carbs, guys, is you're able to manage the amount of carbs you need based off of where your training performance is. So if training progression stalls, now it's time to maybe go ahead and bump it up by 50 grams of carbs per day. This is where it takes a lot of thinking off the table, because now you're just really tinkering with one macronutrient rather than having to adjust all three and all of that. So my biggest recommendation to you guys is if you are focused on body composition, you're focused on performance, and not just having a kind of a simple diet. This seems like most people that like keto or carnivore are doing it for either they have an autoimmune issue, which carnivore can't help with that, or they just want to have simplicity of only having 2 macronutrients rather than 3. I highly recommend you going with a lower fat diet and being able to utilize more carbs. And so, like I said, set your protein static, set your fats about static, and then throughout the year, throughout your week, even if you're carb cycling, you can go ahead and manage your carbs, and your body can efficiently use it for performance and for energy. But I hope this helps some of you guys out there. Hope this at least helps you kind of start thinking about this. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. All glory to God. God bless y'all. Have a great rest of your day.